John Garcia, welcome back to T-Town. I hope you're doing well, man.
I'm doing well, Ryan. Thanks for having me back on.
Man, I got to pick your brain on a lot of different things, and I don't even know where to start. But let's start with Alabama for a couple of minutes, just with the football side of things. Any takeaways from Alabama, Tennessee?
You know, you just honestly at this point you just wonder if, how, when that offense will slow down. I mean, I don't understand how it has gotten to this point so quickly. I mean, we're not that far removed from the intense, I would say, battle between Tua Tagovailoa and Jalen Hurts. You know, we're not that far removed from that. So to be there and then to it's Tua and then to this where it is just where I mean other college teams at this level are already sort of conceding to Alabama. Now, they're not in the SEC, and they won't admit that publicly, but, you know, Will Greer was quoted today, the quarterback from West Virginia, saying that, you know, X and Y teams have been really good, but, you know, we're all kind of chasing that, you know, something of that effect. So just offensively, I've never seen anything like this at Alabama. I'm not sure if it'll slow down or how it'll slow down. You expect it to, because this is a bunch of, in the most cases, teenagers doing this at Alabama. But every time you think that, you know, what is it, 7-8 games in now, it hadn't happened yet. Despite injury, despite different personnel, despite different settings and venues and everyone's best shot, it hasn't come close to happening. And that's just on that side of the ball. The other side of the ball is pretty good too. So the takeaways are that the bye week comes at a good time. It's always a good time before LSU. But also, man, you almost wonder if the bye week's a bad thing in terms of rhythm. But nothing else has been able to slow down this team thus far. So why would a couple extra days off?
John, looking at Quinnen Williams for a couple of minutes. Backtrack. Talk about this young man coming out of high school. Nick Saban talked about him being in the 260 range. They've got him playing up there a little bit closer to 300. Not there yet, but certainly playing bigger than his size and a guy that's done some damage. Talk about his development.
Yeah, well, first of all, I know this will make Bama fans happy. Longtime Auburn commit before Alabama flipped him, so there's that. But, you know, he was a guy who kind of bursted onto the scene and people thought was good. There was never the threat of a fifth star. There was never the, oh, my gosh, this guy's going to be 3 and done potentially, or, you know. It never got to that point in high school. But I will say that from his junior season until his senior season, that year, we saw a huge jump. One of the top 5 or 6 jumps I've seen in an in-state kid going from one year to the next. Another guy on this team who did that was Anthony Jennings. But this guy was a good, solid Power 5 SEC guy as a junior, and he hit another level as a senior. Now, physically, he was still in that 245, 255 range, so he was more of an edge guy who would come inside on certain downs, things like that. And he took big strides, just big strides going into his senior year. But even then, even after he earned his 4th star, because he was a 3-star for the bulk of the process, even after he earned his 4th star, I think a lot of people would have been surprised to realize that he could not only excel this way, where he is arguably the most dominant defensive player in America, but to do so at near 300 pounds. Some of us thought he was close to maxed out at 260, the tail end of his senior year. He looked like he couldn't carry a ton more. So that kind of impacted the projection. But obviously, none of us have been through Scott Cochran's program. None of us have redshirted at Alabama and taken those lumps, which obviously turned into some pretty good things. So that's where the projection game gets pretty tough. I thought Quinnen Williams would be a solid contributor and have a shot at the next level. And obviously we were a little low there, even with the jump he made his senior year. So I think that he's a perfect example of the process, both as a recruit and at Alabama. Some things you can't project. You can't imagine a kid gaining 30, 40 pounds and being faster and quicker and stronger. I mean, all of these things. So he certainly exceeded expectations, but he's still the same kid. He's a kind of a big, goofy, playful kid, but he knows how to turn it on and be serious when he needs to. So I think he's one of those guys that everybody kind of likes, with the exception of opposing offensive linemen now, I would imagine.
We're talking to John Garcia, one of the best in the business. We talk Alabama recruiting with him. let me switch a little bit. In this bye week, the coaches are probably going to be out trying to work some of these recruiting angles. Give us some updates, because it's been a little bit since we really begin to pick your brain about recruiting. What's this bye week going to be like once these guys get through with practice?
Yeah, well, there's certainly always an extra emphasis on recruiting. And again, this Alabama class is pretty close to being full. There's not a ton of spots left. But I think this is the time of year where you start to see some movement. Now, these high school seasons, I know we're going to talk high school in a minute, they're winding down. The regular season is a week or two away from being completed. So now kids are getting a little bit closer towards making a decision. And I think tonight actually could be big for Alabama. Braylon Ingram out of St. Thomas Aquinas in South Florida, he is expected to announce his commitment tonight between Alabama and Miami. And this is another one where we just talked about Quinnen Williams. This is actually a good segue, unplanned, by the way, audience. This is a kid who made a big jump from his junior year to his senior year. And Alabama is one of these programs, Ryan, that values that senior tape so very much. Braylon Ingram was not a guy we've talked about for 6 to 12 months. He was not a guy that we focused in on in covering Alabama football recruiting until the last couple of months, which coincides with his 2018 season. He's bigger, went from about 240 to 260, and he just looks more comfortable and polished as a defensive lineman. Kind of like Quinnen coming out in that he's playing inside, he's playing outside, he's having success in both arenas. So he's a guy who's risen up the board here as a senior in 2018, and I think Alabama is going to benefit from that intensified evaluation and push, if you will, down the stretch for a kid like Braylon Ingram. And all of a sudden, you look at this class that Alabama's putting together on the D-line, already probably the best in America without Ingram. So if they add him and they're still in it for a couple of big-time defensive tackles, true interior guys, this could be one of the best D-line hauls ever under Nick Saban. So my point is, everything's kind of coming to a head with the process. The early signing period is less than 2 months away now. So for those type of kids, it's getting towards crunch time. And sometimes it's public, like Braylon Ingram, who's going to decide publicly tonight. And other times it's more under the radar. So a lot of things are going to be much more in motion now as opposed to a month or two ago. So the bye week comes at a good time there for Alabama to focus in on these last dozen or so targets on the board.
John, what do you feel like is a priority with these final few spots?
Well, D-line is still a priority, even if and when Alabama adds another one. The offensive line had multiple spots potentially open, including the number one player in the state of Alabama, Clay Webb, who is a tough read at this point. Alabama, Auburn, Georgia, Clemson, all in contention there. He's visited all in the last month to 6 weeks. So everybody's felt good at some point with Clay, and he hasn't even taken any official visits. So offensive line going to be a huge focus down the stretch. And then you're looking at the elite guys in spot position. Inside linebacker, Nakobe Dean. Edge rusher, Kayvon Thibodeau, the number one player in the country on the 24/7 Sports composite. And then you're looking at maybe flipping a guy or two, whether it's in-state wide receiver George Pickens, five-star cornerback Akeem Dent, who's committed to the Florida State Seminoles right now. So Bama's going to kind of pick and prod. It's not just one group of guys or one position that most of the chips are on. It's usually more spread out. But if there's a group where there are going to be two potentially more additions, I think that would come up front on both the offensive line and the defensive line. And again, that could begin here not long after we get off the phone.
John, how big is this showdown between Paul Tyson and Talia Tagovailoa Thompson against Hewitt-Trussville on Friday night? Top 5 matchup in the state of Alabama.
Yeah, and teams in the same region, jockeying for position. Everybody, I guess, at this point knows how ridiculous that region is in the Birmingham area with Hoover, Hewitt-Trussville, Thompson, Mountain Brook, all of those, I believe, one loss in the region, and they kind of all cannibalized each other, kind of like we're seeing in the SEC East a little bit. So this one is important for positioning, but I think even more so, Ryan, because both of these teams are going to be favored early in the postseason. I think more so, it's bragging rights. Locally, these are two kind of up-and-coming schools in the Birmingham area compared to a stalwart like Hoover that's always seemingly been there. So I think this is kind of that next step in bragging rights for number 2, if you will, there, although Hoover has already lost to Hewitt-Trussville this year. But these two hadn't played each other a ton. So I think that's on the line. And obviously, the Alabama angle is important here. The two quarterbacks Alabama's bringing in for the future, because, at this point, there's a lot of uncertainty beyond this year, next year. And to know that two guys are on the same field, jockeying for positioning at Alabama against one another. If you don't think that matters, you're kind of a little ignorant, because these guys have competed against each other a ton in the off season and different elements, but never on a Friday night going toe to toe. So I'm expecting a lot of points. I hope the weather cooperates, which I think it will. And it should be one of the more fun games for Alabama fans, because you're literally watching your future and guys with such ties. I mean, you couldn't have two guys with more ties to the University of Alabama, with Tua's little brother and the great-grandson of Bear Bryant going at it. Two different type quarterbacks as well, one big, one small, one big arm, one medium arm, one more athletic than the other. I mean, it's a really nice contrast, even though it's all going to the same place next year. So I think it'll be a fun game, and it's on a national television audience. I think it's on ESPN2 Friday. So if you can't make it to that beautiful new Thompson Stadium, you could check it out on TV. It'll be fun, and it'll be kind of a big night for Alabama with it being a bye week. I expect many Crimson Tide players to perhaps make that drive.
Yeah, it's gonna be a lot of fun. I mean, it's the early preview. I mean, just think about it. We debated Jalen Hurts and Tua Tagovailoa for the last 10, 11, 12 months. And in 2020 and 2021, we'll be debating Paul Tyson and Talia Tagovailoa. I mean, it will be nonstop. Paul Tyson, Talia to Paul Tyson. I mean, think about it. I mean, we're getting an early preview. We've got to start the competition.
Right. This will be the foundation.
Yes.
For sure. 100%.
Yes, absolutely. John, I want you to put your defensive back perspective on. What do you think about this Devon White stuff? Targeting, not targeting, I guess, what side of the fence you're on. Just your overall thoughts of Devon White, and certainly we're trying to free Devon White in this area with a lot of billboards being paid for by LSU fans.
Yeah, you hate it for the kid, man. Look, first of all, let me put in perspective. This is an NFL guy who's going to be hearing his name very early next year, regardless of how he plays and how much he plays Saturday, or 2 Saturdays from now. So that obviously goes without saying. But you just hate it for the kid. This is the apex of his college career, as far as we know to this point. Nothing is guaranteed beyond this. So to not be able to have that stage for 4 quarters against Alabama is just, it hurts, man. It hurts because of the nature. It was like he went to hit Fitzgerald and he was thinking about the targeting rule. It looked like that. He was like, okay, let me push here and not lower my head. Let me not even throw a shoulder at the guy. Let me simply extend my arms and let him know that I'm here, carry out my blitz or whatever assignment he was on. It was like he was conscious of the rule and was trying to abide by it, and was still flagged for it. Now, I get it's head or neck area. It's very gray. It's very vague, but you just hate it for the kid. Now, there's been a lot of examples of things that have looked much worse that haven't been called targeting. So just like the catch rule in the NFL and this new sack rule that you can't even put your body weight on a quarterback, which is just ridiculous, I just wish there would be more clarity or the ability to review and amend some of those things. And you hate that for Devon, and you hate that for the game. Now, it is what it is, and everybody will adjust and move forward, and he'll be out there in the second half. But I hate the rule, and I hate that a kid who felt like or looked like he was trying to manipulate his body to abide by the rules and came very close either way, no matter how you look at it, still gets burned by it. I just think there should be different levels or something where you penalize a kid with the yardage, and that's fine. But just costing any of these kids games, even in the scenarios that look bad, in the helmet-to-helmet stuff, I mean, as a guy who would, cut off a hand to go back and suit up one more time, it really hurts me to know that something like that's such borderline. Nobody got hurt. No, it didn't look malicious. Can cost the kid potentially the game of his life. What if he wasn't an NFL guy? What if he was just a college guy? So I hate something like that for Devon and for the game, because it takes away from it just a little bit. But everyone's going to complain about refs. It's kind of sports culture, especially now in the social media era. And if it's not targeting, it will be something else. So it's unfortunate, but it kind of is what it is at this point.
John Garcia _Jr. there. John Garcia, college football recruiting analyst for 247 Sports, Bama Online, and the big podcast that's very popular among these Alabama fans. So many different ways. You can find it on the YouTube channel as well. But a great way to connect with him is CABC Pod. Crimson and Blue Chip podcast powered by BamaOnline.com. But a great way, just do a simple search for it on the YouTube channel. You'll be able to find all these great podcasts and the great material. John Garcia, I appreciate you, man. I hope you have a great week. Thank you, sir, for being a part of the show.
Anytime, Ryan. Thanks for having me again.